The oldest ship in Earth's fleet had no weapons. This was not an oversight. It was not a budget decision. It was not a philosophical statement about the nature of conflict or humanity's aspirations toward peace. It was something much more specific and much more deliberate, a choice made by the people who had built her, 61 years ago, based on a calculation that most military minds found either brilliant or insane, depending on how long they thought about it. The ship was called the Endurance. She had been built during the early years of humanity's expansion into deep space, when Earth's government had made the decision, controversial then, quietly vindicated since, to send one vessel into the unknown with no weapons, no military crew, and one very specific mission. Find what was out there before it found them. Not to fight it, not to establish dominance or claim territory or project power, just to find it, to look, to understand. Because the people who had built the Endurance had spent enough time studying humanity's own history to know that the most dangerous moment in any first contact was not the moment of meeting. It was the moment before, when both sides were operating on assumption rather than information. And assumptions about the unknown were almost always wrong, and wrong assumptions in the dark had a tendency to become wars. The Endurance had been traveling for 61 years. She had found 11 civilizations. 9 of them humanity now had peaceful relations with. One had been hostile in ways that required a different kind of response and got it. One was still in progress. Her crew was not the original crew. 6 generations of scientists, researchers, diplomats, and one category of person that the Endurance had developed a reputation for producing that had no exact equivalent in any other human institution. People who were, by temperament and training and 61 years of institutional culture, genuinely comfortable with not knowing what came next. Captain was the 12th captain of the Endurance. She was 44 years old and had been born on the ship, which made her one of 11 living humans who could claim that distinction. She had never been to Earth. She had seen it on screens and in photographs, and through the long-range sensors of a vessel that had spent most of her lifetime moving steadily away from it. She found, when she thought about this honestly, that she did not miss it exactly. You could not miss a place you had never been. But she carried it with her in the way you carry something you have always known about and never touched, with a particular kind of careful attention that people who had actually been there sometimes found more reverent than their own relationship with the place. She was thinking about this, which she did sometimes during the long, quiet watches, when the Endurance found its 12th civilization. It found them the way it found most things, gradually in pieces, through accumulated data that slowly became too coherent to be background noise. First the energy signatures, then the radio frequency patterns, then the artificial structures on the 3rd planet of a system that had no name in any human database, orbiting a star they had simply as HD 441 7 years ago, when it was just another point of light in the long-range survey. Lieutenant Park, who had been on sensor watch for 6 hours and was 40 minutes from the end of his shift, looked at the accumulating data for a long time without saying anything. Then he said very carefully, "Captain, you should see this." Was on the bridge in 4 minutes. She looked at the data for a long time too. "How long?" she asked. "At current speed, about 3 weeks to visual range." "Any transmissions?" "Lots," said. "Nothing we can decode yet, but the pattern complexity suggests." He paused. "It suggests a lot, actually. I'd rather not say until I've had more time with it." Nodded. She pulled up the Endurance's contact protocols, the document that every captain reviewed at the start of their tenure, and that had been refined and updated by 61 years of actual use into something that was less a set of rules and more a kind of accumulated wisdom about how first contact actually worked versus how people imagined it worked. The first line of the document read, as it always had since the 2nd captain had added it after the 3rd contact mission. "The most important thing you can do in the first 72 hours is nothing. Listen, watch, resist the urge to act. You will know less than you think and more than you realize, and the ratio will reverse itself if you are patient." Set the document aside and went to get coffee. She had a lot of listening to do. The civilization on the 3rd planet of HD 441 had been watching the Endurance for longer than the Endurance had been watching them. This was something did not discover until day 9, when the translation algorithms had worked through enough of the signal pattern to produce something approaching basic comprehension. And one of the first coherent things that comprehension revealed was a record, careful, detailed, going back 4 years, of observations of a vessel that had been moving through their outer system range on a trajectory that had brought it, gradually and apparently deliberately, toward their world. They had been deciding what to do about it for 4 years. The debate, as far as the translation could render it, had been substantial. There were those who believed the vessel was a scout, the advance element of an expansion force using a slow approach to avoid triggering defenses. There were those who believed it was a research vessel of some kind, though the lack of any aggressive action over 4 years of observation made this group's position stronger as time went on. There were those who simply did not know and said so, which, noted with private appreciation, was apparently a position available in their political system. What had tipped the balance eventually was something unexpected. The Endurance had a tradition. It had started with the third crew, nobody was entirely sure why. It had simply begun and continued of broadcasting music during the long, quiet stretches between systems. Not as a communication attempt, not as a signal, just as something the crew did, the way crews do things on long voyages, because silence gets heavy after a while, and music is one of the things humans had always used to make it lighter. The civilization on HD 441's third planet had been listening to humanity's music for 4 years. They had not known what it was at first. The signal pattern was clearly artificial, clearly structured, but it matched no known communication protocol and carried no decodable information in any framework they applied to it. It was only when one of their acoustic researchers, a scientist who had spent her career studying the communication patterns of their own world's non-sapient species, looked at it from a completely different angle that something clicked. She had recognized it as art. Not human art specifically, not music as a concept that translated directly to their experience, but the underlying signature of something that was not information and not communication in the functional sense, but was also clearly not random, something that existed to be experienced rather than decoded, to produce an effect rather than convey a content. She had brought this finding to the debate. It had changed everything. You do not send art ahead of a conquest fleet. You do not fill the long, silent approach of a military scout with something made to be felt rather than feared. Whatever this vessel was, it had been making something beautiful in the dark for 4 years with no audience it knew of. And that was either the strangest military strategy anyone had ever conceived, or it was something else entirely. The debate had ended. They decided to answer. The first transmission from HD 441 reached the Endurance on day 11. Was asleep, was not, which was why he was the one who sat very still in the sensor bay for 30 seconds after receiving it, making absolutely sure he was reading it correctly before going to wake the captain. She came to the sensor bay in the clothes she had been sleeping in, which meant she arrived faster than if she had taken time to change, which had correctly calculated she would consider more important than arriving formally dressed. She looked at the transmission. It was music. Not human music, something completely different in structure and tone and the precise frequencies it occupied. Something that had clearly been made by minds that heard the world differently, processed pattern differently, found beauty in different arrangements than human ears and human experience had produced. But it was unmistakably music, made in response to theirs, sent in the dark across the distance between them like a hand extended in a direction where you weren't sure anyone was standing. Listened to it twice. "How long to visual range?" she asked. 19 days, said. "Send them something back," she said. "Something I don't know, something that sounds like a conversation rather than a performance." She thought for a moment. "Find the recordings from the third crew, the informal ones, the sessions they did in the common room on the long stretch through the outer systems." She paused. "The ones where they were just playing for each other, not performing, just being." Found them, he sent them. 19 days later, when the Endurance reached visual range and established first formal contact with humanity's 12th new civilization, the initial exchange took 40 minutes and covered the basics of location, biology, and intent. The exchange that followed lasted 6 hours and was almost entirely about music. It was, every member of the crew agreed afterward, the best first contact they had been part of. Several of them had been part of 4 or 5. Filed her report that evening. It was detailed and careful and covered all the necessary technical and diplomatic ground. The last paragraph was shorter than the rest. They heard us before they knew what we were. They decided we were worth talking to because of what we made in the dark when we thought no one was listening. I have been thinking about what this means, and I believe it means something important about what we are, not as a military force or an economic power or a political entity, but as a species. We make things. We make them even when there is no audience. We make them especially then. 61 years of this ship traveling alone through the dark, playing music for empty space, and it turned out the space was not empty and the music was heard. I think the people who built the Endurance without weapons knew something that took the rest of us a little longer to understand. We were never going to find what was out there by being ready to fight it. We were going to find it by being, unmistakably and irrepressibly, ourselves.